Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Welcome back for another episode today, episode 167. Today is a current trends topic where we talk about things going on currently that are relevant and pertinent to my estate and elder law world, and or maybe they're things I've seen on the news or stumbled across on social media. Well, last week I mentioned maybe doing an episode inspired by the show Jane the Virgin, and there was some episode on it about like a couple doing their estate planning. Well, I went digging so I could watch the episode and found out that I needed Hulu or one of those platforms to be able to watch it. And naturally, whichever platform it was, I don't pay for. And out of principle, kind of like how I've been when they put sports and games on like Peacock, which I also don't have, I just refuse to buy a subscription. Maybe I'll cave eventually, but not today. So the Jane the Virgin episode was thrown out the window. So all of that to say, rather than talking about that, on today's current trends episode, we're going to be talking about Terri Schiavo. Now, if you recognize her name, you're probably thinking, well, that's not a new one, Jenny. That's not like a new topic, I should say. Um, well, I recently gave a presentation to a pretty large crowd. And as usual, when I talk about living will declarations and advance directives, I usually, will mention Terri Schiavo and I'll say, raise your hand if you've heard of her name. Well, at this presentation, only about half the room raised their hands. And it's kind of a strange observation that I've noticed, but it feels like less and less people know about Terri's case and Terri's name. And the lessons her case taught us, especially from an estate planning perspective, are so important. So, on this topic, at the very beginning of Legal Tea, like way back in episode 10, I talked about a modern day Terri Schiavo story named Josh Barras. So, today's episode is going to be about Terri's case a little bit, as well as an update on the case about Josh's case. And honestly, my goal with this episode is just to bring this topic of living will declarations and advance directives back to people's attention. So let's actually first start with Josh's case, not Terri's case, Josh's case. I discovered Josh and what was going on with him through social media. Josh has a wife named Megan. And before I really dive in, remember this is a real life case, people. Josh and Megan are real people. Josh's family are real people. Their story is very sad all around. So honestly, if you've had a cruddy day and are listening to this, I would consider maybe picking up this episode another day because it kind of gets a little heavy. So, according to an article in The Advocate, in November 2018, Josh, after an attempted suicide, survived but suffered from extreme brain damage. That resulted in Josh being in a vegetative state and on a feeding tube in a nursing home where he still resides today. In June 2019, a judge in Lafayette, Louisiana, granted Megan, his wife, her request to be what's called the tutor, Tutor, over her husband and Josh's mother, Kelly, as the what's called under tutor. So before I go into more detail, Louisiana's legal system has a lot of French influence. So when I say tutor and under tutor, which are just kind of funny words coming out of my mouth, but Louisiana refers to tutorship as like other states would think of as like guardianship or conservatorship. So we have his wife, Megan, as the tutor of Josh, and his mother, Kelly, as the under tutor. Now, according to the website Exceptional Lives, a tutor is much like what we would say is a guardian. They are the decision maker. So Megan is the decision maker for Josh. Now, under tutor is like a unique to Louisiana thing in that their purpose is really to ensure that the tutor is operating in the person's best interest. So here, Kelly, Josh's mom, her role is to make sure Megan is operating in Josh's best interest. What's strange about this is that tutorships are usually reserved for minors, and Josh was not a minor at this point. And I was unable to find if that was just like a mistake in the court filing or a mistake by an attorney or what. But nonetheless, things got cleaned up in May of 2020 because, according to the Advocate article, when Megan was designated as the curator, which is like a tutor, like guardian for adults, but Kelly, Josh's mother, was not designated as the undercurator. So, according to the Advocate article, that's of course in the source links for this episode, the conflict between or the disagreement between Megan and Kelly appears to really be between a wife who is just ready to let go and a mother who refuses to give up hope. Megan wanted to move Josh home from the nursing home and let him pass away, while Kelly wants to keep him alive. Now, in March of 2021, Kelly, through her attorney, filed a motion with the court to restrict Megan from taking any actions that would end Josh's life. And in response, according to the Advocate article, the judge granted a temporary restraining order to prevent Megan, his wife, from accelerating Josh's death, meaning she could not take him out of the nursing home he is in, she could not remove his feeding tube, etc. Josh and Megan's story, and well, Kelly as well, made such a huge splash in social media, much due to Megan highlighting things on her TikTok account. And that led to Dr. Phil catching wind of their story. And in March of 2021, Megan and Kelly appeared on Dr. Phil to explain both of their sides. Now, I highly recommend watching that episode. I think it does a great job at summarizing not only what has transpired, but also puts a face to everyone's name. And it even brings on like a medical doctor to give his opinion. So, on that episode, according to the Advocate article, Kelly stated that she believes that Megan is exploiting the situation for money. And Kelly said, quote, just putting this out on social media, she had a venue where she could raise money and his care is completely paid for through Medicaid. And there's really nothing that he would need to purchase, end quote. Now, when I did an episode, like I said, way back on episode 10 of Legal Tea, that's really where things stood at that point. But I'm telling you what, so much has happened since then. So I wanted to do kind of a follow-up episode on this case, as well as just kind of bring, living will declarations and advance directives some attention. So fast forward time to more current, like 2022, 2023. Megan ended up getting disqualified as Josh's curator, and primarily, according to the Advocate, for using donated funds that were to and for Josh on gambling. Now, the judge then appointed Josh's sister, Robin Wells, as curator and his mother, Kelly, as under curator, which shifted legal decisions for Josh away from Megan, his wife, and to Robin and Kelly. So today, as we sit here in the fall of 2024, Josh is still living in the same nursing home. I shouldn't say the same nursing home. He's still in a nursing home. I'm just not sure if it's the same one or not. And his family, specifically his sister and mother, are in charge of all of his decisions. You know, like I said earlier, this story reminds me of the name The Woman, Terri Schiavo, a name some may remember. And like I said, I bring her up a lot. I bring her name up in client meetings often. And mostly people remember Terry's case and her name. But something I've noticed is not my younger clients. So According to Wikipedia, Terri had gone into cardiac arrest at the young age of 26. And as a byproduct of that, she suffered from massive brain damage due to a lack of oxygen to her brain. Much like Josh, Terri ended up in a persistent vegetative state. Now, Terri's husband, Michael, wanted Terri's feeding tube removed, and Terri's parents, Robert and Mary Schindler, wanted the feeding tube left in. Michael ended up petitioning the Sixth Circuit Court in Florida to remove her feeding tube, and Robert and Mary opposed that petition. Now, Terri's case bounced around the legal system a whole bunch, like 14 appeals, 5 district court proceedings. There was intervention by politicians like Jeb Bush and President George W. Bush. And there were even like multiple attempts to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court level. I mean, honestly, way too many motions and petitions and hearings to like really name and go into for this episode. But at one point in the court saga, Terri's feeding tube was removed, and I think that occurred in 2001, and was reinserted just days later due to the court proceedings. Then, again, in 2005, this time, the feeding tube was removed yet again and stayed removed, and Terri died about 2 weeks later on March 31st, 2005. Now, when I talk about Terri in client meetings, I often say, we knew what her husband wanted. We knew what her parents wanted. We heard from various courts, heard from various politicians. We heard from various news anchors, etc., etc., etc. But whose opinion were we missing? Terri's. And that is the lesson that Terri's story, as well as Josh's story, teaches us. That we sure have a lot of opinions of a lot of people in both of their cases, but most importantly, we do not have their opinions on whether they would want to be kept alive the way that, that Terri was kept alive for decades, and the way that Josh continues to be kept alive. So that is exactly why you do estate planning. And part of estate planning are documents like a healthcare proxy, a living will declaration, advance directives to provide what your wishes are, your medical healthcare wishes are if something happens, and specifically as it relates to end of life decisions. And that way, people do not have to guess what you would have wanted. No one would have to be guessing that. Okay, let's wrap this episode up, shall we? So sorry, that's a little bit of a heavy episode. But next week, we're back to the celebrity estate planning type of episode. And during those types of episodes, we dive into a celebrity or a big name person that has passed away. And we go into how their estate looked from an estate planning perspective. There are some, in celebrity estate planning episodes, there are some like very successful stories that we've covered on here. And there's probably more cautionary tales. But nonetheless, next week's episode is about Frank Gifford. Some may know and remember him as a professional football player for the Giants, and or some may know and remember him for being Kathy Lee Gifford, who I feel like most people know who that is. Frank was Kathy Lee Gifford's husband. So tune into that next week, Legal Tea listeners. Until then, talk to you then and stay well.